Okay, today I'm going to be talking about In the Silence of Christ. And this talk is about the silence of Christ, what that means, how do we get to it, and what prevents us from getting to it. Because it's always available to us if we can access it or let ourselves access it. So let me define what's meant by this thing called the silence of Christ. So the silence is also equated with darkness, because when we get silent, it's like we're going into a dark space, positive dark space. It's also like we're going into a space where we're waiting for the light to emerge. It's actually symbolic of this winter equinox. It's interesting that there's a debate about when the birth of Christ was, but we've chosen as a collective to say it's December 25th as a time celebrate, because that's a time when we've just gone into the darkness for a period of time, the winter, or the beginning of the winter solstice. The darkest day of the year is on the 21st, basically, of December. But after that, the 22nd, the 23rd is today, and so forth, it gets lighter and lighter. So when we go into the darkness, into the silence, what do we get? The lights are turned on. So in a sense, the winter solstice is a symbol of the silence of Christ. It's like getting out of the darkness, that which you wish, but in order to get out of the darkness, with that which you wish, you have to go into the darkness in silence and wait. So let me give a few other terms for what the silence of Christ means, because we hear that and we might think, oh, this is a special thing. I never heard of that before. What does that mean? Well, let me give you some similar meanings that are all synonyms for the silence of Christ. One is the divine mind. Another is the divine personality. Another would be that still small voice within. That's also the silence of Christ. The unconscious in a psychological sense, the soul in a spiritual sense for some. The consciousness of God is also the silence of Christ. And the creative principle is another term. All those are synonyms, and guess what? There's many other terms that connect with the silence of Christ, but that's basically what the silence of Christ is. These are all related terms. Now, we break it down in our denomination, our philosophy, into consciousness of the Father. And what we could say is that consciousness is the Father, the daddy of Christ. It gave birth to the Christ. And guess what? The mother, actually, put this consciousness is the seed, not really, it didn't give birth, it's the seed of Christ. The mother comes along and gives birth to the Christ. The mother is basically unconsciousness. The unconsciousness has an intelligence, and that intelligence knows how to take the seed and produce something that we want. And that's also connected with the silence of Christ. Basically, the mother gives birth to consciousness. It gives body to consciousness. It allows consciousness to come out and to exist. So, in a sense, the silence of Christ comes out of the mother. The concept of it is planted by the Father. It may sound a little confusing, but guess what? It's all just one thing, so don't worry about that. Now, how do we go into the silence? And what happens when we go into it? Let me try to answer that question. So when we go into the silence, God speaks to us. God speaks to us when we're quiet. In fact, the whole world functions a little better when the mind is quiet. And there's two broad ways of getting to the silence. One is the obvious, somewhat obvious way of what's called an inner-directed focus. When we concentrate on something, we meditate on something, we allow our intuition, our visions, our dreams to speak to us directly when the mind is obviously quiet and inwardly focused. But there's another way that gets to the same result. That is, if we look around us at signs in nature and things that are going on, that speaks to us too, but in a different way. It speaks to us in the sense that we took the clue from an outer sign, either the climate change or ice melting or whatever is going on. We look at the outer sign, but if we can take that outer sign and say, what does this mean? What is God trying to tell me? What is the symbolic meaning of that? Then we have to go within to contemplate that. And we get the same answer as we would get as if we were focusing on a dream. Now, we in fact, you can see an outer thing going on, and you can get a dream book or kind of use some intuitive tools to interpret what does this mean as a symbol. So when things are going on in the collective, yes, they're literally going on, but there's an intuitive spiritual meaning God doesn't just speak ordinary German or English or French, but in the language of symbols and signs that are a little bit deeper. So we always have to ask the message, what is the meaning of this thing that I'm seeing? What is the meaning of what's going on? And that's where we get to using an outer sign to get an inner meaning. Let me share a little story that happened to me, just fresh off, hot off the press. And this was, I was coming home from a Best Buy near the first of the year, about 3rd of December, I think to be exact, after buying a computer printer. Walked up on my back porch around 8 o'clock at night. It was pitch black, but the porch light was on. I just happened to notice, hey, there's a dead bird sitting on a bench on my porch. How did that happen? What went on? What's the deal? What's the meaning of that? And I was a little bit tired to really focus on the meaning, but I surmised that, oh, there's a big picture window above the bench, huge. And the bird must have flew into the picture window because it didn't recognize the picture window was there, probably banged his head on it and fell dead on this bench. It was a little brown bird, yellow chest, and I just thought about that overnight. What could that mean? And it came to me when I looked at the dream book and contemplated it. Okay, this is connected to the Trinity in the sense that a bird is symbolic of spirituality and our mental faculties. But there's also a third part of the Trinity. There's body, mind, and spirit. The body was absent, but the spirit and mind were there with the bird. What happened to the body? It hit its head and fell on the ground. So I thought about that. Okay, what is going on in my life that might be connected with that? Well, the two biggest things going on in my life at the time were I had a whole bunch of plants being delivered in about a week, 700 plants. They were ground covering plants. And I had to think, how am I going to get these things in the ground? I can't be bending over 700 times. That's just too much with a little shovel. That's just too much. So I was worried about how to do that. And also, that's when the stock market began to crash. I had some funds in there, and it went down 4% overnight. And I said, I'm not letting it go down anymore for me. So I got my money out. Since then, it's gone down another 12%. So I at least spared myself. It wasn't a complete loss. But what the message was, Alan, you need to get some grounding. You need to get some grounding. One of the grounding was to take the funds out of the stock market. That was bringing some reality and not just living in my spirit in my head. The other grounding was, you can't be bending over 700 times to plant these plants. Sit on the ground and plant the plants. Oh, that's grounding. Big idea. So that's what I did. I got a big piece of cardboard, screwed it across, and just scooped it out pretty much with my hands and a little small shovel, but it saved my back. 700 plants. Can you imagine that? I did that over a 3-day period. Thanks to some treatment by Reverend Carolyn and my beloved Susan, it kind of helped things along, because I said, thank God I got these things planted. But that was a big worry of mine at the time. So when you see a symbol, you can think in terms of, what is it related to in my life? Those were the two things going on that I made the connection with. So the Trinity kind of helped, because the Trinity, one of the Trinity ways of looking at Trinity is body, spirit, and mind. And the body part was the part being damaged, the part that needed some repair. So I had to bring that back in. So sitting on the ground and ditching these funds and not just thinking all spiritual, mental, brought me back to a sense of wholeness. So that's just an example of how you can see a sign in nature and connect it to an inner process. Now there is kind of a paradox. And this is what the paradox is that I think when you think about it, most people think when you go within, you lose something. You're not connected with the world. When you go within, it's like kind of being a monk, just kind of forgetting about the world. But that's not true. When you go within, the paradox is you become more alert. Your mind becomes sharper. Your body becomes sharper. You have more of yourself when you're silent than when you're making a lot of noise trying to do things. So going into the silence actually increases your ability to react and your ability to think. And also silence is right at the core of what we call the law of cause and effect. The effects we see in the world come from the silence. Everything, these chairs, this table, these candles, everything comes from that still small voice, comes from that quiet place, and it explodes. So we need to look at what was I thinking in the silence to create all this stuff that's going on. That's one way to contemplate it. Now, also, there's a question of how do we set aside the external confusion that keeps us away from the silence. And I want to give briefly an east-west perspective, because it may open up how to look at this. And the East perspective comes from the I Ching, which is basically the founding principle of Buddhism, the founding principle of Taoism. That's where the I Ching, that's his claim to fame, that those two religions come out of that thing called the Book of Change, or the I Ching. And it has two statements that it makes that are similar to what's in the Bible, but let me say what they say and then give the biblical analogy. All things are possible to those who practice in action. All things are possible to those who practice in action, meaning that the more you don't act, the more you get done. The more you act, the less you get done. It sounds kind of strange, but that's what it says. It also says the way to move forward is by remaining still. What? The way to move forward is by remaining still. Have your mind still on what you want and let the world come to you. Let God provide it to you. All you need is to have the focus. Because sometimes we think, I got to do, I got to go someplace. No, you just have to be still and be focused and let the world come to you. Simply put, what the I Ching says, what these two statements say is, don't change anything until it's necessary. And you'll find out it's not really necessary because it'll be changed for you. That's basically what it's saying. Now, we switch to the Bible, the Western perspective. What does it say about the same thing in a totally different language? Well, the first thing comes out of the 46th Psalm. And what it says is, be still and know that I am God. Just be still. That's all you have to know. And God is right where you are. If you're still, it just comes to you. It's so much easier, but it's hard to not just want to do something, go someplace and make something happen. But we don't have to do that. And Jesus says, before you pray, before you ask for something, go into the closet and shut the door. That's what Jesus says. What does that mean? Before you start praying, I want this, I want that, go into the silence and shut the door. Get quiet, get still, and find out what's up. Now, why we enter the silence is to become unified with God, also unified with good. Those are the reasons basically why we go into the silence, and to become more awake and more alert. And we can't, unfortunately, maybe it's not important, this is the way it is. There's no point in trying to meditate and go into the silence if you've got issues, if you have some animosity, if you have someone you haven't forgiven, if you have something, some gossip going on, some judgments going on, some hate going on, or some fear going on. The silence isn't going to give you anything. It's going to you're going to go into silence, you're going to pray with all this non-forgiveness on your mind, and you're going to wonder why God is not answering your prayer. Well, you're not following the rules. You have to follow the rules in order to have the silence return to you what's there. In order to have joy, you have to give joy. In order to have love, you got to give love. In order to have happiness and positive things happen, you have to give those things to others. If you don't give it out, you ain't going to get it back. Now I'm going to bring this to a close with 3 little things that you should avoid doing, or 3 little things that keep us from receiving gifts, Christmas gifts all times of the year, whenever we want. There's 3 little small things. One is we should, make sure I get this right. Okay. Any thoughts of using gifts negatively or destructively in any way is not going to get you what you want. So you have to avoid thinking that way. And I want all this money, or I want all these things so I can defeat my enemies. Or I want this, this, and this so I can just buy this, this, and this. It can't be something that harms others or used in a destructive way. That's number 1. You should avoid doing those things. Number 2, gift requests that are inconsistent with the law of oneness, the law of unity, the law of joy, the law of love, will never be given. If your gift is inconsistent with that, if it's inconsistent with love. Now, one of my favorite ministers from way back, one who got me really into science and mind, a woman named Reverend Margaret Sorch, you probably all heard her name, this is my last quote, that's the thing I want to say, had a simple way of defining this whole thing, and it sounds a little crass, but this is what she said. She said, don't piss in the pool you have to swim in. It never works. With that, I'm going to turn this over to our beloved singers, and they're going to deliver a song called Silent Night.